What if reading the Bible at the witching hour, between 3 and 4 a.m., wasn't an act of devotion but a cosmic gamble? What if certain scriptures, when spoken aloud during this eerie time, acted like keys to doors we were never meant to open? Here's what they don't tell you. Scripture is powerful, and power doesn't care if it's wielded with holy intent. Sometimes the words meant to protect you can invite something far darker. I learned this the hard way. Last December, I was in the worst place of my life. Between losing my job and my partner leaving, I was a wreck, emotionally and spiritually. I felt abandoned not just by the people I loved, but by God Himself. Desperate for answers, I turned to the old family Bible that had been sitting untouched on a shelf for years. It was late, past 3 a.m., but insomnia and anxiety had a hold of me. I thought reading the Bible would calm my nerves, maybe even bring me some kind of clarity. Instead, it opened a door I couldn't close. The first passage I turned to was Psalm 23, verse 4. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. The words felt comforting at first. I read them aloud, my voice barely above a whisper in the silent kitchen. But the more I repeated them, the more the atmosphere seemed to change. The air grew heavier, almost suffocating, and a strange chill crept up my spine. I felt like I wasn't alone. I ignored the feeling and kept reading, flipping to random pages as if searching for something. That's when I landed on Deuteronomy 32, verse 22. For a fire is kindled in mine anger and shall burn unto the lowest hell. Something about the phrase made my chest tighten. As I read it aloud, the room grew colder, and I heard a sound. A faint knock coming from under the floorboards. My rational mind fought to explain it. Maybe it was the pipes, or the house settling. But the knocks came again, louder this time, and in a pattern that felt deliberate. I should have stopped there. I should have closed the Bible and gone back to bed. But I was stubborn, driven by a mix of fear and curiosity. I flipped to another passage, this time 2 Kings chapter 2, verses 23 to 24. The words were chilling, and he went up from thence unto Bethel. And as he was going up by the way, there came forth little children out of the city, and mocked him, and said unto him, Go up, thou bald head, go up, thou bald head. And he turned back and cursed them in the name of the Lord. And there came forth 2 she-bears out of the wood, and tare 42 children of them. I read it aloud, questioning why such violent imagery was in a holy book. As the words left my mouth, the lights flickered and went out completely. The room plunged into darkness, and I froze. My heart pounded in my ears as I clutched the Bible tightly. In the dim glow of the streetlight filtering through the curtains, I noticed a shadow in the corner of the room. At first, I thought it was a trick of the light, but then it moved. Slowly, deliberately, it stepped into view. The figure was tall, unnaturally so, with elongated limbs and no discernible face, just a blank void where features should have been. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. The shadow didn't come closer. It simply stood there, as if waiting for something. Desperate, I flipped the Bible open to another random page, hoping for a passage that would offer protection. My trembling hands landed on Matthew, chapter 10, verse 34. Think not that I am come to send peace on earth. I came not to send peace, but a sword. The words felt like a warning, but I read them aloud anyway, hoping their power would dispel whatever was in the room. Instead, the shadow seemed to grow darker, more solid, as if it was feeding on the very words I spoke. I don't remember how long I sat there, paralyzed with fear. Eventually, the lights flickered back on, and the shadow was gone. But the knocking beneath the floorboards returned every night after that. It wasn't just knocking anymore, sometimes it was scratching, faint but unmistakable. And the dreams, oh, the dreams were the worst part. I saw faces I didn't recognize, twisted in agony, and heard whispers in languages I didn't understand. One phrase kept repeating in the dreams, though, Abaddon. I later learned it's a biblical term, a name for the angel of destruction. I reached out to an old college friend, Marcus, who'd studied theology and had a fascination with the occult. When I told him what happened, his face went pale. You were reading at 3 a.m., he asked, his voice trembling. I nodded. That's the witching hour, he said. It's when the veil between worlds is thinnest, And some scriptures, especially ones about wrath or judgment, can act like summoning rituals if read aloud at that time. "What did I summon?" I demanded. He hesitated, then said, "It might not be a demon in the traditional sense, but something ancient, something drawn to the power of those words. You may have unknowingly opened a portal." The next night, I armed myself with holy water and a crucifix. I decided I wouldn't run from whatever was happening. At exactly 3:15 a.m., the knocking started again, this time louder than before. It came from the walls, the ceiling, the floor, everywhere at once. I gripped the Bible tightly and shouted, "In the name of God, leave this place!" For a moment, the noise stopped. Then I heard it, a low, guttural voice that spoke my name, drawing it out as if savoring the syllables. I flipped the Bible open again, desperate for something that could save me. My eyes landed on Revelation 9:11, and they had a king over them, which is the angel of the bottomless pit, whose name in the Hebrew tongue is Abaddon. As I read the words aloud, the voice laughed, a deep, bone-chilling sound that echoed through the house. The crucifix in my hand grew scorching hot, and I dropped it with a cry of pain. When I looked at my palm, there was a burn in the shape of a cross. The activity subsided after that, but the house never felt the same. Marcus told me to cleanse the place with prayer and holy water, but he left me with a chilling warning. Some doors, once opened, can't be fully closed. Whatever you invited in might not leave completely. It could be waiting for another invitation. To this day, I can't open a Bible without feeling a wave of dread. And sometimes late at night, I still hear faint knocking. I thought it was over. The knocking had stopped, the dreams had faded, and the house seemed normal again. For weeks I convinced myself that whatever I had unleashed had finally gone back to wherever it came from. But then something happened that shattered my fragile sense of peace and left me questioning everything I thought I understood about that night. It began with the Bible itself. I hadn't touched it since the incident, leaving it where it had landed on the floor that night. I couldn't bring myself to pick it up, as if the very act of holding it might reawaken whatever darkness I'd summoned. But one morning, just before dawn, I woke to the unmistakable sound of pages turning. At first, I thought it was the wind, but my bedroom window was shut tight. The sound continued, slow and deliberate, as if someone or something was thumbing through the book. Against my better judgment, I crept into the living room. The Bible was no longer on the floor where I had left it. It was on the table, open to the middle. The pages fluttered as though an invisible hand were flipping through them. I stared, frozen in place, until the pages stopped moving. The book lay open, revealing a single verse highlighted in an eerie crimson stain that looked too much like blood. The verse, Leviticus 19:31. "Regard not them that have familiar spirits, neither seek after wizards to be defiled by them. I am the Lord your God." My stomach churned. The words seemed like a warning, but I couldn't figure out their purpose. What was trying to reach me, and why? I shut the Bible and shoved it back onto the shelf, my hands trembling. "I'm done with this," I muttered aloud, as if declaring it would make it true. But the sense of unease lingered, and I couldn't shake the feeling that someone, or something, was watching me. Later that day, Marcus called out of the blue. His voice was frantic, almost panicked. "Listen to me carefully," he said. "I've been doing some research on what you told me, and I think there's more to this than we realized. That thing you encountered? It's not just a spirit. It's tied to you now." "Tied to me?" I echoed, my pulse quickening. "Yeah. You didn't just invite it into your house. You gave it a foothold in your life. These entities, they're ancient, older than anything we can imagine. And they're clever. They don't just leave because you stop paying attention. Sometimes they play the long game." I wanted to dismiss his words as paranoia, but deep down, I knew he was right. I'd felt its presence, even in the silence. But what he said next made my blood run cold. "Do you remember the verse you told me about? The one from Revelation? About Abaddon?" "Yeah," I said slowly. "Well, I dug deeper. Abaddon isn't just a destroyer. In certain texts, he's described as a keeper of souls, a guide for those who are already damned. And if he marked you, he trailed off, leaving the rest unsaid. That night, I didn't sleep. I stayed up, pacing the house, every light on, waiting for something to happen. By 3 a.m., the witching hour, I was a wreck, staring at the clock and jumping at every creak of the floorboards. But the night passed without incident. Relieved, I started to let myself believe that maybe Marcus was wrong. Maybe it really was over. But the next morning, when I went to make coffee, I noticed something that nearly made me drop the mug in my hand. The Bible was on the table again, but this time it wasn't open. A small, folded piece of paper rested on top of it, as though left there deliberately. My heart pounded as I unfolded it. The handwriting was mine, but I had no memory of writing the words. I never left. That was all it said. I stood there, paralyzed, the note trembling in my hands. The knocking started again, faint at first, then louder, coming from every direction. I turned in circles, my breath coming in shallow gasps. Then, the voice returned, low and guttural, echoing through the room. "Did you really think you could escape?" And then I felt it. A hand, cold and impossibly strong, gripping my shoulder. I spun around, but nothing was there. The last thing I saw before the lights flickered and went out completely was the Bible, flipping open again on its own. The verse it landed on chilled me to the bone, Matthew 7:21. "Not everyone that saith unto me, Lord, Lord, shall enter into the kingdom of heaven, but he that doeth the will of my Father which is in heaven." The knocking stopped. The house was silent, but when the lights came back on, I wasn't alone. The figure stood in the corner, its faceless head tilted as if watching me. But this time it wasn't alone either. There were others, shadows upon shadows, filling the room. My voice caught in my throat as the first shadow stepped forward, whispering words I couldn't understand. And then it smiled, or at least I think it did. What if this was never about the house or even the witching hour? What if it was about me all along?